Today, we're looking at Noodler's Bernanke Black. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, as the name suggests, Noodler's Bernanke Black is a black ink. Before we get to the writing samples, let's take a look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies over the years. Now, the one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put it into water, I put a line of ink down, put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds, and let it rise up. Now we see a nice dark gray line at the bottom. It's gray all the way up and it starts getting much darker, which means it doesn't feel like this is a permanent ink. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I put it into the water for that 10 to 15 seconds. We get a much darker line at the bottom, a lot more of the gray comes up, and it is not as dark at the top of that chromatography. So again, this does not look like it is waterproof as an ink. Now, resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how difficult it might be to clean out of your pens. The smear is let dry for 3 days before I actually test it. We see that the highlighter reactivated and started to feather that ink out. Now, water doesn't seem to move it a whole lot, but it definitely lifts a whole bunch of it off. That drop is only there for 30 seconds. Flush does the same thing. We see that it lifts a lot of the ink, but there's plenty left behind. Bleach, on the other hand, is completely removing it. Now, the page is stained yellow as a residue from the ink, but I'm sure given more time that it would be completely removed. This is a bell curve showing the normal distribution. For the 365 inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5. But keep in mind that normal is 2.1 to 2.9. Noodler's Bernanke Black has a viscosity of 2.67, which we see puts it right in that green region of normal. So it's slightly thicker on the normal side, but certainly a very normal ink. Now, this bell curve is for the average dry time. For the 365 inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds. Here, normal goes from 13 to 21 seconds. Noodler's Bernanke Black has an average dry time of 11 seconds. We see on the bell curve that 11 seconds means it is a fast drying ink. Not in the fastest region, but it's definitely a fast drying ink because it's to the left of the yellow in that orange. I find my average dry time for an ink by averaging the extra fine and medium nib done on my writing samples for Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now let's get to the writing sample. I got this ink in sample form. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub. I use a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Looking at Clairefontaine, we have no bleeding, no ghosting. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It's black. Onto the extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 2 seconds to dry. I consider the Bernanke ink, the Noodler's fast dry inks, great student inks. I don't have a need for fast dry inks. If I had a need for fast dry inks, I am all over big bottles of this ink because it performs very well and it holds up really well. We saw in the chemical tests, it holds up real well. A little bit of movement, only bleach gets it. It holds up to highlighter, which makes it nice for students. Medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 3 seconds to dry. Now the whole no feather thing when it comes to the fast dry inks is a big deal. A lot of fast dry inks feather. They're being aggressive to get into the paper, but this one isn't feathering. And I don't remember seeing much feathering on decent papers. Decent papers. We're going to see cheap papers later. Looking at the scrubbies, we're not seeing color variation in the scrubbies, and you could definitely recover this if you smeared it. On to Tomoe River. We have no bleeding, we have ghosting. With the 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Same with the extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 4 seconds to dry. On a paper that resists drying, 4 seconds to dry. That's miraculous here. That makes this paper much more bearable to me. I'm not a fan of the Tomoe River. I know everybody is. I'm not. But that makes it manageable. Medium. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 6 seconds. Even with the medium, 6 seconds to dry. Nothing when we look at a scrubby. No shade is expected ever. And oddly, I still can't recover this if I smeared it on Tomoe River. One of the reasons I don't care for Tomoe River. On Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting. With the 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Blick. With the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 2 seconds to dry. Now, I did use this with a much wetter, just to see if I could actually get a little bit. And I'm using the, the Pier Cardin President medium to take my notes. And every pen I put this ink in, because I've used this ink now in, I think, 5 different pens, not include, 5 different pens, yeah. And it's always the same black. The same black. So that's nice. It's nice to have an ink that's very consistent no matter what you put it in. You know what color you're going to get. So that's, the fast dry is one thing. The consistency of color is another. It's fantastic here. Looking at the scrubby, no color variation. We don't expect it. I could recover that smear, which is great. And because I see this as a good student ink, I went with student type papers. So here's a composition notebook. We have no bleeding. We have ghosting because the paper is so thin, for the same reason we have ghosting on Tomoe River. But these lab notebook papers, they performed very well. I've been very impressed with them, and this ink does great on it. This is a perfect student ink paper complement here. This is absolutely perfect. If you're a student, composition notebook, Bernanke Black, or Noodler's Fast Dry Series, go with them. Perfect. Look at that medium at the top. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. That's fine. Onto the extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 1 second to dry. It's almost instant. Look at that smear. Almost instant. That's fantastic. We get no color variation when it comes to the scrubby. And then I go to the 20-pound cheap paper. And I did this just because if I'm looking at a student ink, let's use the paper that students frequently get. We get bleeding. And I see that as much more a result of that paper than I do this ink. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to say this. I work in a school. You make me write on cheap paper. I am not going to stop using my fountain pens or the inks that I have in them because it's going to bleed. I'm going to move on with my life. It's going to bleed through, and I'm not going to worry about it. And that's what I'm going to tell people. This is not something that I'm keeping for the rest of my life. When it's on this paper, it's not archival anyway. So don't worry about it bleeding through. And if it hits the next page, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. Looking at the medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Same with the extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 1 second to dry. Instantaneous. Look at that. No smear. I couldn't smear it. I had to pull out a scratch piece of paper. I tried like 6 times to smear this ink. I could not smear this ink onto this paper. We get no shading when it comes to the scrubby. So that's what I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding an ink that looks like Noodler's Bernanke Black, I would prefer to find an ink that would complement its color on the page. Being that Noodler's Bernanke Black is a black ink, I thought a nice orange or orange red would be very nice. I chose Elixir Siloso Sunset for that. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I'm going to ask if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. Now, to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, what I do is I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day and use it. I then put it into the Pier Cardin President with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Finally, what do I think of this ink? This is a perfect student black ink. It dries quickly, which is good to help avoid smears. Now, I don't have a need for fast drying inks, but if I did, this one would be absolutely perfect. So now the big question, would I buy a bottle of this ink? No, I wouldn't. I would not, because I don't have a need for a fast drying ink, and I have a preferred black ink already. Thanks for watching.